Hi, I run Superbike Stash. I figured I'd walk through and show you a little bit about what's in the workshop, what I've collected so far. This is a 1986 Suzuki RG500, the square 4 two-stroke that was made to replicate the 500 GP bikes of the mid and early 80s. This particular one is stock. Has Wolf exhaust chambers on it and Lance Gamma air filters. Runs really great. Super fun to ride. You know, it's kind of amazing. This is where really sport bikes are pivoting and getting to be super exotic for what you could buy for the street. Really starts kind of in the early 80s and mid 80s. This is a later bike. This is a 1998 Bumota Vdua, referred to as the bike that killed Bumota, as it's their endeavor to make a motorcycle with an engine in it. It has a V2 500 cc two-stroke motor that was fuel injected at the time, which was radical and unfortunately did not work correctly. They had some problems with their crankcase seals and other things, and basically it was just such a failure for the company. They had to buy them all back and fix them out of bankruptcy when one of their engineers, Pierre Caroni, bought all the production out of the factory, figured out what was wrong with the crankcase seals, and rebuilt the motors and converted them to carb motors. This particular bike is a Evolution Finale, so excuse my pronunciation, I'm obviously not Italian, but that means it came with JM Jolly Moto expansion chambers, came with a little bit more carbon fiber, higher state of tune. It supposedly produces about 130 horsepower. This particular example is stock except for a little bit of carbon fiber trim, and I've replaced the Antero wheels, which most Bumota collectors refer to as Ancoras, because they weigh a ton. They're like 20-pound wheels. So I've replaced them with Dimag carbon fiber wheels, which has done much to, oh sorry, this is BST carbon fiber wheels, which really lightens this up. This should be about 375 pounds full of fuel, 130 horsepower. A lot of fun to ride. This bike is a 1993 Ducati 888 SPO. This bike has got, I don't know, maybe 7,000 miles on it. It was bought out of Duck Pond in Virginia. It was not running correctly. It was a consignment bike that one of their customers brought to them, and it needed some cosmetic fixes, but the biggest thing that was kind of interesting was it didn't run correctly, which they didn't really disclose. I didn't really care, because whenever I buy these things at this vintage, I'm going to go through them anyway. And going through this bike, discovered it has V2 G-grind cams, and it has high compression pistons. The pulley drives were not bolted down correctly. The valves were not adjusted correctly. It was mechanically, it just never would have run correctly. Probably why it has so few miles. Fortunately, some guys do all this stuff and then I don't know what they do. They just don't get it together and get their investment paid off. So it's been put together correctly, cams degreed, everything's set up, and then I've added a spaghetti exhaust to it, and it produces about 106, 107 horsepower on the dyno. Really great running bike, you know, correctly tuned. That's a pretty good number for these. This particular model also, I've added Marvick magnesium wheels to it, so it handles as well as it runs. Really quite a lot of fun to ride. Kind of represents what Ducati was racing in the earliest part of the 90s, late 80s, early 90s. So this is a 1994 Kawasaki ZX7R M2. So this is the second year of the race homologation bike that Kawasaki produced. On the first year bike, this is what Scott Russell took to win the World Superbike Championship in 1993. These bikes are really, really interesting bikes. They had a lot of stuff that people just don't realize, like aluminum gas tank, flat slide carbs, fully adjustable suspension, including the swing arm pivot, solo tail section with aluminum subframe, just a bunch of stuff that you know, if you just looked at it and said, oh, that's a Kawasaki ZX7R, you'd be missing what makes this special. This particular bike obviously has a Muzzy pipe on it, as you can see, but I was also able to find some Performance Machine blue anodized wheels, which would have been kind of the way they looked when they raced, as well as I had a set of Brembo cast iron full floating rotors that I used on a ZX11 that I had for ages, and lo and behold, that those set of rotors bolt up to this too, so that's what's on the bike. And then lastly, it has an Olin shock on it. This is a really nice riding bike. It's a lot of fun. It's that whole Kawasaki thing, which is really very much a little bit of a special feel to it, as Kawasaki guys know. This is a 2002 RC51SP2. So this is the bike that Colin Edwards would have won the World Superbike Championship on in 2002. This bike is largely stock. It's got a tail tidy setup on it. I've got all the stock pieces. And part of the reason it has that is because you can't fit the Sato titanium high pipes at this bike with the stock fender. It's got a power commander in it, Durbin carbon fiber air box. It's got Dan Kyle forks on it, Dan Kyle suspension rocker, Olin shock. Managed to find some Marcassini magnesium wheels for it, and it works really, really nicely. Oh, also found some Brembo rotors for it too. So it's a little bit lighter, and boy, it handles well. I got to say, the stock bike was just awful riding. I could not understand how it could be competitive in World Superbike, because it was just not a good, nice bike to ride. One of the most just not something I'd like. But set up this way, boy, this thing works super, super well. And the reason I bought this bike was because I had this bike. This is a 2003 999R Ducati. So this is the race homologation Ducati for 2003 with the controversial styling. This bike is totally stock except for the handlebars. Happens to be plated as and the clutch cover happens to bear the number plate 69. Not that that makes a lot of difference, because Ducati was inclined with these bikes to just push them down the production line and grab number plates out of a box and put them on the thing. But certainly as an American, 69 has a special meaning, even though Nicky never rode one of these. So it has the Termi exhaust that would have come in a box with this bike, and it's been tuned. It works very well. The BSC carbon fiber wheels that are on it make a big difference in the way it performs. This is a 1989 Japanese domestic market OW01 Yamaha. So in 1989, while Honda was running RC30s, this is what the Yamaha boys would have been using to compete with it. This is a totally stock bike, 800 miles on it, something like that. It was restricted for the Japanese market, which means different jetting, but the biggest thing is when you take it apart, you see that the intake rubbers are blocked with this just wall of rubber. So they're probably, I've got a picture of it somewhere, they're probably 40% blocked. So they just restrict the intake by putting this big obstruction in there. You either cut that webbing out, or else you just replace them with open intakes, and then you get it jetted. And this bike has been tuned, and that's been done to it. So it's bearing an American spec run in terms of its performance. Okay, so this bike is a 1983 Bumota KB3. Now I call it, it's kind of quotes KB3 because it's actually built on a SB4 Bumota frame. This was a magazine bike that Nick Einach put together with the help of a bunch of his friends and mates. Being an industry guy, Nick had access to some really great talent. So this was put together and written up in 1992, September issue of Motorcyclist as a kind of special bike. I'm old enough to remember that stuff, and this is really a special bike. So Jesse Gatlin built the motor, undercut transmission, big block, I think it's 1218 or something like that, dual plug head, flat slides. As Nick bought this as a wreck, if you read the article, the body work was not particularly with the bike. There are all these fasteners that weren't on the bike. So Nick had a buddy by the name of Mike Worsham who did a whole bunch of work to put this back together. I've spoken to Mike. He made basically all the brackets and fittings. He just did an incredible piece of work. And it works really well. I've tried to keep this as much as it was like in the Motorcyclist magazine, as I think it deserves that kind of treatment. It's a great runner. PM wheels, Performance Machine wheels, which I think would have been Roland Sand at the time, made custom wheels for it, made custom brakes for it, brake calipers and mounts. So this is a real period industry piece of what the industry could do as a special bike. This is a 1985 NS 400R. This particular bike is pretty tatty. It has Jim Lomas pipes on it. It showed up, was you know, a relative bargain, and I'm a rider, so I bought it because I can put these things back together and ride them. So this is this works real well. It's got a V3 two-stroke 400cc motor. It was Honda's answer to the Suzuki Gamma I showed earlier. In particular, it's kind of interesting because these bikes are just small, narrow, light, seemingly handle really well. The power, of course, is lower than a 500cc four-cylinder, but still a great ride. A lot of fun to ride. And these bikes just, they're a period where we, in the States, you never could have gotten this stuff when it was new. Okay, on to 2008 Ducati 1098R. This is stone stock except for the handlebars and seat. It's got the Termi exhaust that would have come in a box with it. It's been tuned. This is, you know, these bikes, it's kind of funny. I've ridden a lot of Ducatis. When people talk about torque in Ducatis, this is a bike that really exemplifies that. And it exemplifies it to the point where I'm kind of a front end rider. I like to pile weight on the front end and steer at the front end. This bike, because of the way it produces power, I change my riding style. I enter turns really slow and basically just hammer the exhaust to power through the turns, because that's the way it's the most fun. It's just a hoot to ride. Totally different. Totally kind of just much more like a hooligan performance bike. This is a 1979 Suzuki GS1000S. People refer to these as West Coolies. This particular bike, although I have all the stock pieces, this bike has a Telefix forks brace. I've gotten and put a AirTech front fender, custom painted. I've got the stock one in a box. Basically, braid steel lines, got an oil cooler on it, has a MotoGP Works 4-in-1 period replica race pipe, GS1100E swing arm, Works Performance shocks. So it's pretty much period correct as somebody would have hotted one of these up during the day. It's comparatively Cro-Magnon in terms of its riding experience, but it's a lot of fun to ride nonetheless. Reminds you of what it was like back in the day when things with folding foot pegs were in advance. This is a 1993 Ducati 900SS Super Light. It's a buddy of mine's bike. It's all correct. It has a stain tune exhaust on it, and otherwise it's an aftermarket seat. Otherwise it's all stock. All the stock parts are with this bike, and it just sold a couple weeks ago on Rare Sport Bikes for Sale. Just waiting for the new owner, who's in Colorado, to come out and pick it up. Nice bike. This one actually also has a 944 kit in it, and has been tuned and built by Doug Lofgren, who just does a great job on Ducati performance. This is a 1998 or 7 Pomoda SB6R. This bike, I'm the second owner. It's kind of interesting. It was out of the LA area. Pro Italia had it, and they put it in their collection for a period of time, and then it got sold to the big Harley dealer down in El Paso. I'm trying to remember the name. I'm not sure it's Bartles, or I'm not a Harley guy, but they had it in their collection, and they basically decided to move it on, and I decided to buy it. Boy, you know, even though this is a relatively heavy Bumota at about 450 pounds, it was still about 60 pounds lighter than the Suzuki donor bike, the GSXR 1100 of 1996. The interesting thing is the way the frame is built. The center of gravity on this bike is perceptibly lower than the normal Suzuki or any bike of the period would have been, and that really impacts the handling. So relatively short wheelbase, low center of gravity. Boy, this thing handles really well. It's the time when the Japanese still hadn't quite figured out. They were figuring it out, but hadn't really figured out how to make a good frame. A little bit of shame here. This is a 1986 GSXR Suzuki Limited with the dry clutch. This is stone stock, and the shame is that this bike only has about 2,000 miles on it, so I've kind of just dry stored it. I mean, you know, what's tough is I'm a rider, but at the same time, you know, when things kind of get rare and you buy them and they have low miles, you just find yourself a little bit hard pressed to really go out and flog them. So this bike used to have flat slides on it, Olin suspension, just a pipe on it, just a bunch of stuff. It's been returned to stock and pretty much is now a display piece, ready to run, but you know, not being run. 1997 Ducati 916 SPS. So this bike is the beginning of kind of the reputation of Ducatis as fierce torque monsters. This has the 955 motor in it, even though it's labeled a 916. If you look at the serial numbers on the engine, you can tell when they're SPSs and when they're not. This is just a super nice bike. It's stone stock, except for the Termes, and I have a stock exhaust on. I have a stock exhaust for this. I still ride this. This is just a lot of fun. I take it pretty easy on it though, as you don't want to throw that down the road. 1987, I think. This might be an 88 or 87. I don't remember the year. This is an RT30, obviously. It's stone stock. These are just fantastic bikes to ride. You ride one of these and you think about the period of time and you think, you know, was Fred Merkel a great rider winning the first 2 years of World Superbike, or was it this bike? Because this bike is just, even today, there's nothing like it. It feels like a solid piece. It is super integrated feeling, even though it has non-modern wheel sizes. It just handles really, really well. And the gear-driven cams and the V4 motor, very special sound. When these were introduced, this just would have been kind of the cat's meow of bikes. So we'll go back outside and we'll cover some other bikes here. So this bike I'm coming up on is, this is my $400 Craigslist special 1996 GSXR 750. I bought this bike, I saw it on Craigslist. It looked really forlorn. The bodywork wasn't on it. It hadn't been run in about a decade. But you know, it's like 800 bucks, and I've been looking for one of these for a while. And the toughest thing with these is an awful lot of them got modified in ways that they just can't be restored. You know, people polish the frame. I looked at one beautiful one on my way to Road America, and you know, they chromed all this stuff. It just made it so that, you know, even though it's a beautiful bike, I mean, you know, fixing chrome, well, the fix is you just buy different pieces. It just becomes a nightmare. So the ask price was $800, I believe, and I told the guy $375, and he told me it was $25 more than the salvage yard was offering him, so it was mine. The thing that impressed me about the bike is the bike was completely stock except for the windscreen. There was no aftermarket pieces on this bike or that came along with the bike. It was just completely stock. It is no longer, even though I have all the stock pieces, is because I'm a rider, I've picked up some extra pieces and slapped them on there. Hindle 4-in-1 titanium exhaust, and more recently I managed to score a set of Marcassini magnesium wheels for it, EBC ProLite rotors, and Olin shock. It works pretty nicely. You know, it's interesting to see what Suzuki was doing 96. This was considered to be radical because it was just super light compared to the competition. Probably about 40-50 pounds lighter than anything else being produced by any other manufacturer at the time. This is a 1997 or 98, I forget sometimes what year this is, DB2 Edizione Finale, or Bumota. So this bike is pretty much stock, except I put different clip-ons on to get the bars higher, and in order to do that I had to put different reservoirs on the shock and clutch to get more clearance underneath the fairing. Otherwise this is a little bit too low for me. I've also put Brembo cast iron full floating rotors on it versus the Ducati style pizza cutter rotors, and I put Dimag carbon fiber wheels on it to reduce weight. These would have come with what Bumota guys refer to as Ancuras. They are basically 20 pounds a wheel kind of wheel. So by putting the Dimags on it, I saved probably 10-15 pounds a wheel, which obviously makes it handle a lot better. Oh, I forgot, I've also put flat slide carbs on this. I think after tuning it produced about 86 horsepower. Pretty good for a Ducati 900 SS motor. Nothing that spectacular, but you know, it works really well. Okay, so this is my 1995 Honda RC45, recently acquired through Iconic Motorbike auctions. Kind of the perfect bike for me. Got about 10,000 miles on it, so I can ride it without worrying about you know, basically de-virginizing something that I paid big bucks to have as a virgin. And it's a lot of fun. What's interesting, compared to the RC30, this thing is much more polished, and the sad thing is it just picks up more weight. You know, I think as World Superbike becomes more and more competitive, they're putting more and more power in these bikes, and basically that means they have to have more and more frame, more and more suspension. They just end up being heavier and heavier, especially as a street version. So it's still a wonderful bike. And it's something I had to do because I wanted what I call the RC trifecta, which is the 30, 45, and the RC51. So this completed that part. This is what I consider the most valuable bike of everything I own. It is a 1995 Ducati 916 Varese. So it's one of the early bikes that was produced in Varese while Ducati was trying to recover from the fire that occurred at the Bologna manufacturing plant. So this particular bike has Dimag magnesium and carbon fiber wheels on it. It has a set of carbon fiber cans on it. It has Öhlins internal later model forks on it, and Brembo full floating rotors. It has a set of Healy bars on it. It has a period correct carburetor comfort seat on it, which is why the seat is so humped at the back of the tank. Why is this bike the most valuable bike to me? This bike has 62,000 miles on it, and basically this bike has been everywhere with me, all over the United States. Been to California, been to Colorado, been to Texas, been to the Ozarks, been to Deals Gap, been to, you know, the Northeast. It's really been all over the country with me, and it's just a great running bike. It was tuned, I tuned it when I bought it. It produced about 110 horsepower, still produces 110 horsepower, and just works really well. I've also added an Öhlins shock to it. Hard for me to remember everything that's been done to this bike over the years, but I keep it in stock trim, or near stock trim, and it gives me relief so that I don't have to ride that 916 SPS as much. This is a bike I can just go out and flog on and not worry about, because it's got high miles, and you know, that's what I've always liked to do, is just ride this bike. So I've been, I'm kind of old, and what's happened is a bunch of my friends are even older, so they've been selling me projects that they're not going to be able to complete. So this is a 1982 Katana GS1000 that came to me from a buddy of mine who was in his later 60s, had some health problems, decided he wasn't going to complete it, so he sold it to me, and I'm going through it and kind of trying to make it nice and right. So the body was pretty good, but you know, you get something that's as old as this and it's just dirty and there's all sorts of stuff to it. Being me, although I have all the stock pieces, including exhaust and everything, I'm going to modify it to make it nicer to ride, put the stock pieces in a box, and then later on someday, you know, I'll put it back to stock, or some other guy who, you know, comes upon what I got after I'm dead will go, oh, look, stock pieces. So this has got Öhlins shocks on it. It'll have flat slides on it. I'm waiting for MotoGP Works to build me a 4-in-1 low pipe, so I don't have to cut the frame to put it on. Their pipes are excellent, and they, you know, I'm looking forward to getting that. And then, you know, we'll get it back together, and I'll have a Katana to ride. Should be fun. Kind of interesting how looks grow on you after a period of time. This bike is my fix to the fact that I'm not riding my GSXR Limited. So this is a 1986 GSXR 1100 I bought off a buddy of mine, and it was bought as a non-runner, and boy, you don't buy a bike as non-running as this often, and I'm not sure I recommend it, but you know, it is what it is, and I'm not a guy to destroy a motorcycle or part of a motorcycle just because it has issues. So the issues with this were the clutch had sat so long that the you know, the parts that the plates that had dried out, the material flaked off the clutch. There were 2 or 3 spun rod bearings in it. It was just really pretty hammered. The valve followers, you know, are not particularly their weakness on these. They're not hardened enough, so they were pretty worn. So this has been totally rebuilt, the motor, as an 1109 with cams in it, hardened Valve followers, clutch has been replaced, you know, just gone through, all the bearings done. So should be a good motor once I fire it up and run it. It'll be run with flat slides on it. I have an Olin shock for this bike. I have Racetech forks for it. I haven't decided on the wheels. On the bench you can see a set of Marcassini magnesium 17-inch wheels that will fit on this bike. I don't know that I'll do that. I may run the stock wheels. We'll have to see. I liked the way these bikes with the bigger wheels handled, because some of the roads I ride on are not the greatest, and a bigger diameter wheel simply just doesn't find the bottom of every hole. This bike, I think I've got a Yashimer exhaust for it. The bodywork has all been restored and is sitting stored away. So when I get this done, this should be a really nice running and looking bike, and something I can really enjoy. Which is, you know, none of us are getting any younger, so the whole idea is to get the stuff now, to be able to flail it, to have fun with it, and then, you know, someday somebody else will get their shot at it, and hopefully they won't just leave it parked. My daily rider, you know, you got to have a bike with hard bags, a KTM Super Duke GT. This actually has a power commander on it, and a cat eliminator. Rottweiler intake. I never leave anything that I'm going to regularly ride alone. So that's the story from what I got in the workshop now. There's one bike that's missing from the workshop, which is my Aprilia RS250. That bike was a Challenge Cup bike that I put into street trim, and in Minnesota you get to plate that stuff. It's kind of interesting. The state wanted income, so you can plate anything. It's kind of wild. That bike, unfortunately, the crank seals went on it, so I've had to have the motor rebuilt. So that's out getting its motor rebuilt, as I decided it's not something I do regularly, and I figured easier just to have somebody who actually knows how to do this stuff do it than for me to Helen Keller my way through it, because I do some wrenching, but I'm definitely not the world's greatest wrench. Anyway, hope you've enjoyed this, and if you want, follow me, and I'll try to keep up to date as to what's happening in the workshop and what's in the workshop.